a pleasure to be here, and I thank the Sisters of Life for their kind invitation. I've been asked to speak about the joys and challenges of motherhood, the importance of education in the family, and if there is time, to give a little bit of advice for those young women in the audience who are seeking marriage and motherhood. Sure. Let me begin this way. As a little girl, I loved to play house. I had a walk-in closet, and I set it up as a cozy cottage for my stuffed animals. I was their mother. By some genetic fluke, they were all of different species, bears, monkeys, dogs. I tended to them, I nurtured them. I would feed them, cuddle with them, and I also taught them. I set up a little classroom in our cottage. They never fared very well in their studies. I'm not sure if that was my poor teaching or if the lack of a brain was an insuperable obstacle to learning. But I persevered in my mothering and my teaching. I look back on that little scene with great fondness. I was a little girl wanting to love. I wanted to care for another, to make a home. In that little cottage, a desire was being expressed that the church would put in Gaudium et Spes as the desire to make a sincere gift of self. JP2 elaborated upon this concept in a most compelling way. I find that phrase so beautiful. The kind of ontological background for this is that human beings are called to love. We're the kind of creature called to love. As I now understand my childhood and my adolescence, though I don't like to remember my adolescence very much, my childhood attachments and affections and even my young adult attachments and affections were an expression of this desire, the desire to make a sincere gift of self and to receive that gift from someone else, to form, again in the language of the church, a communion of persons. I have found this in marriage, a true experience of this reality. My husband and I share a unity of purpose. We have a pledge of fidelity, care, goodwill, which is a source of tremendous joy. Marriage has also entailed a painful growth in maturity. But because of the vow, our home is a safe and I would say a healing place. And I would love to confer with Dr. Laracy about the healing dimensions of marriage. We are for each other. My husband and I are for each other forever, and we know that. Having exchanged with my husband this mutual gift of self, I was in a place to make an even more radical gift of self, motherhood. Motherhood is an indescribable privilege. First, you nurture new life in your own body, in your innermost place. You are a sanctuary. You protect and nurture and nourish a person. Then you welcome this child into the world. I would commend to you the writings of a very profound Swiss theologian of the last century, Hans Urs von Balthasar, who talks about the importance of the mother's smile. That when a mother cradles her infant, let's say newborn, and I remember doing this so well with my children, it's so profound. The mother is communicating to the child that he is good. And he recognizes existentially and immediately that he is a different person. He's a separate self. And by virtue of her smile, his own goodness is affirmed. Moreover, the mother's smile, think of the mother cradling her baby in her arms. He learns that the world is good, the world is safe, it's hospitable. This is at a profound ontological and existential level, and it's the foundation of home. The mother is the animating center of the home. The privilege of being a wife and mother takes its shape there in building the culture of the home. Not only do we welcome the child into the world, but we also have the great task of forming that child. As JP2 puts it, Parents are the first heralds of the gospel for their children. They communicate the faith to them by word and deed. And the gift of self that we mentioned earlier is expressed daily through daily acts of service, courtesy, sacrifice, sometimes heroic sacrifice, prayer, catechesis, religious observance. Home can be the center of Catholic culture, and the joys of motherhood found therein are incomparable. I was a university professor for 15 years. And then when we had our third child, and I had this intimation even with our first, I realized my children need me. They need me to be there. And what came as a surprise to me was that I also needed them. I needed to be there, to be part of the rhythm of their day. I have not had a single second thought, honestly, in 6 years. And I was tenured, I was an associate professor, I was teaching in the law school and undergrads as well. My decision to come home has been so profoundly gratifying. I haven't regretted it for a single moment. Why? In part because our home life, and I'll talk about the challenges of our home life in a moment, our home life is rich. It's full of celebration, probably too much. We try to cultivate a liturgical rhythm. We have meals together every day. We have a lot of conversation. In fact, my oldest child can talk a blue streak. There's music. Everyone's playing an instrument. And not only because we're homeschooling, I think I would commend this to all of us here, our home attempts to be a place of learning. The home can be a center of learning, not the University of Paris in the 13th century, but a place where the love of the world is cultivated by learning about the world, where the great Catholic heritage is transmitted, and children are initiated into what Charlotte Mason calls a great tradition. Stories are recounted, myths and heroic tales are read, nature lore is savored, hands are employed in art and handicrafts, beautiful music is enjoyed, instruments are played, guests are welcome, and the art of conversation is cultivated. It's in the home where you become fully human, fully alive, and the mother makes this possible. May I have some water, please? The home can become this center of learning and culture. When asked about what are the most important things for successful homeschooling, Layla Lawler, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right, you probably know her work. Oh, thank you, would you kindly open it? Who is a veteran homeschooler. Sure. And a very wise woman said, you need two things to be a successful homeschooler. And I think this would apply to non-homeschooling families. How do you become a successful, a happy Catholic family? Order and wonder. Order and wonder. So you have rhythm versus chaos. You have a routine. You have a reasonable amount of tidiness that allows every member of the household the space and the freedom to wonder. Why is it that, or how does this work? Or, Mom, what kind of a bird is that? Your home is filled with things that, in the words of Anne Shirley, one of my great heroines in literature, gives scope for the imagination. Your home is a place where there are books, lots of them, beautiful books, art, music, a table setting. When you sit down to dinner, you have a candle and you have some beautiful music playing in the background. So your home is a place of order and wonder, and this yields joy. I might say, just by way of a footnote, and we can talk about this during the discussion, we don't have a television, we don't have video games, and we don't even have a smartphone. And I would say that the fact that we don't have the dominance of screens in our household gives the household a measure of peace and depth and the capacity to wonder, and also fosters the habits of attention, observation, and presence. We can talk about that a little bit more. And if I may, I'm mindful of the time here. If I could give a bit of advice that might sound radical, though I think it's reasonable and I'd be prepared to make an argument for it. To prepare yourselves for motherhood, consider getting rid of your smartphones and getting rid of your televisions. I think there has not been a single technology that has done more to damage human community than the smartphone. And I realize that that's a radical claim. I'm prepared to defend it in a cordial way. The joy of motherhood and homemaking is profound. I came to discover when I retired from professional life, this is what I was made for. But it's also hard. Sleep deprivation, heavy carbs, original sin. It's a potent combination. At bottom, though, what makes it hard is that children are persons. They're not stuffed animals. And they're not replicas of ourselves. They've bodies and minds and spirits, and in our case, wills and temperaments all their own. They have a transcendent origin and destiny. While we mother them, they are not ours. We do not own them. They and we are sinners. And though we might have a glorious vision for home life, it may not be realized, or it may not be realized every day, or only fitfully and partially. So we have to correct and penalize and forgive our children. We have to teach them and guide them in what is right and wrong, and try to train in them good habits, leading them slowly, sometimes painfully, into a firmness of character that will allow them to thrive, as Aristotle would put it, to make them good people who do good actions. We also have to ask for their forgiveness, try to reform our habits. I'm 50 years old, and I still feel a resistance in myself to making my bed in the morning. That's pathetic. But I'm still doing it. I'm still cultivating it. We have to be the kind of people who can give a sincere gift of self to each other. And we have to rely on grace and mercy. And I would say the real assistance of the Blessed Mother. I never had a strong connection to Our Lady for a host of complicated reasons. But as a mother, I've come to appreciate her reality. She's really there, really able to help us. And to try again tomorrow. There was a refrigerator magnet that my friend and I in grad school had. I don't even remember who the author of this quotation was, but I found it touching, and it's come back to me. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the small voice that says, I will try again tomorrow. Or to quote from Anne of Green Gables again, tomorrow is a new day with no mistakes in it, yet. To live maternity and marriage as a vocation is a call to joy. And the depth and breadth of this vocation is astonishing. This was recognized well by G.K. Chesterton last century when these tasks were beginning to be disparaged. Against the so-called progressives of his day who were critics of homemaking, Chesterton contends, and this is where I'll end, to be Queen Elizabeth within a definite area, deciding sales, banquets, labors, and holidays, to be Whiteley within a certain area, providing toys, boots, sheets, cakes, and books, to be Aristotle within a certain area, teaching morals, manners, theology, and hygiene. I can understand how this might exhaust the mind, but I cannot imagine how it could narrow it. How can it be a large career to tell other people's children about the rule of 3, and a small career to tell one's own children about the universe? How can it be broad to be the same thing to everyone, and narrow to be everything to someone? No, a woman's function is laborious because it is gigantic, not because it is minute. I will pity Mrs. Jones for the hugeness of her task. I will never pity her for its smallness. Thank you.